thought this was a setup. So I went and I abandoned the car 2 farms away and walked down through the glen at about 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, crawled up the hill with my rifle in front of me, expecting to be shot at any time. Glendinning, I was born and raised here in South Armagh. At the start of the Troubles, I would have been in my late teens in 1970s. My father had served in the British Army, and I served in the UDR for 4 or 5 years. But our involvement in the conflict also was because our family were involved in politics. Our family were founders of the Alliance Party, which was a cross-community party in Northern Ireland. And that caused divisions inside our family. It meant, for example, for 2 years, my mother and her sisters didn't speak to each other because they considered us as traitors to unionism, having been involved in setting up the Alliance Party. Well, when we were serving the UDR here, particularly at the very beginning, you brought the weapon home. So I can remember many an evening sitting in this house with an SLR on the floor. And I remember one night the gates were locked and I couldn't work out, and I thought this was a setup. So I went and I abandoned the car 2 farms away and walked down through the glen at about 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, crawled up the hill with my rifle in front of me, expecting to be shot at any time. Turned out that cattle had been out on the road and my mother had closed the gate in order to stop the cattle coming in. But that's the sort of thing that you had to do. I mean, you'd look under your car, you'd to be very careful about where you went. In terms of service here, though, this area suffered a lot through the conflict, from both communities, particularly the end of 1975, the beginning of 1976. There was a period of sectarian killings in this part of the world, which were pretty gruesome. Just coming up to Christmas 75, there was a bomb attack and shooting in Guildford. Following that, in early January 76, there was a shooting of the Reeves in Whitecross, Catholic family, later admitted by the UVF. There was a similar shooting that night by of the O'Dowd family near Clare in Guildford. A few nights later, a minibus leaving the local factory here in Glendinning, regular thing that happened every night, taking workers back to Bessbrook, was stopped after it had passed Whitecross. Gunmen get on and shot everybody on the bus. One man survived, and that was the King's Mills massacre. I think I was very lucky in the people I served with, that they were all trustworthy. I was warned inside the regiment, because my politics were known, that there were certain platoons and certain groups that I shouldn't go with, because in fact I was in more danger from the people behind me than the people in front of me. Because I wasn't necessarily fully trusted. And that, I suppose, is one of the reasons why I left the UDR, and also because I had gone through Queen's and I was going to teach and was getting more and more involved in politics. I stood and got elected to Belfast City Council in 1977 to represent inner city Belfast, a constituency that covered the markets, Donegal Pass, the Lower Falls, the Clonard. So here I was, a middle-class Protestant, representing a working-class Catholic and working-class Protestant constituency in the middle of a conflict. And there were considerable difficulties in doing that, particularly, for example, at the time of the hunger strike. I remember being pulled out of a meeting in Divis Flats by a group and a leading provisional. I must admit, that night I thought that I was going to be shot. I wasn't. I got out of the place. I was terrified. But next night I had to walk back into Divis Flats, because if I hadn't walked in, I would have shown that they had won. The base that I served in, Glendinning, was not very far from here, about a mile or so away. It was destroyed in a bomb attack. A lorry was freewheeled down into the back of the base late one night, and the lorry blew up, and the guard who were on that base were all killed that night. One of them, Bobby Crozier, my brother knew very well. He was at school with my brother, and I would have known him very well. That base was never reopened, and there is a monument there to the death of those colleagues of mine who died that night. So there's a lot of distrust and a lot of hurt in this part of the world. And one of the things that's happened since the conflict has been that some of that healing is now taking place, and people are developing a degree of trust and a degree of understanding, which was not possible through the time when people basically were looking after their safety and looking after themselves. There are, of course, those who still are feeling a lot of hurt. And indeed, not only that, but there has been an upsurge recently in violence. We've had attacks on Newry Courthouse. In the last few weeks, there was an attack on Newton Hamilton Police Station. There was a previous attempted attack on Keady Police Station. So there is a worry, a growing worry, that the war may not be completely over, that there are still those who believe in the use of physical force and who are wanting to continue the violence that occurred in the past. And I think that worry needs to be examined, and we need to look at why people are thinking that way and how we can try and dissuade people from getting involved and getting sucked back into the tragedies that occurred for the last 30, 40 years.